Thank you for joining us on our QTV Business and Economy program. The Business and Economy program is intended to promote the ideals of a corporate Gambia identity with the objective of forging partnerships through dialogue between the public and the private sector, civil society organizations, and the international community. In today's episode, we shall be discussing the youths. And to help us do that, we have invited two youths who would share their experiences. But before we get to the introduction of these two youths, let us make reference to the Gambia Bureau of Statistics 2013 census. The demographics, the population demographics of this country. What is it telling us in terms of the youths and the trend of the demographic trend of the youths? These are some of the questions that we would be looking at in today's program. As a country and as a government, are we paying attention to the youth demographic trend? As responsible citizens of this country, are we taking into consideration the statistics, the intelligence that is coming out from these surveys to help us better prepare our economy in terms of addressing the challenges and the needs of the youths? By way of introduction, we have two panelists, Mrs. Hadi Jonga, who is a youth activist. We also have David Jeng, who is a youth entrepreneur. Both of these two invited distinguished guests would help us delve into the 2013 youth statistics as provided to us by the 2013 census. Ladies and gentlemen,
thank you.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to start by getting your perspective in terms of the overall demographic trend of this country. If we look at slide 1, and here on the slide, we have looked at the general population growth of the country going as far back as 1963. The population of the country in 1963 was under 500,000. It reached 500,000 by 1993. It crossed the 1.5 million mark in 2013. And it is projected to be a little over 2 million by the current year in which we are, 2018. But by the same token, if we look at the composition of the youth cohort within that population, we have seen it being 36% in 2013, and also it is projected to be around 39% in 2018. So you could see that there is an upline trend, if you will. What is your perspective, if I may ask, David, in terms of the trends that you see? What do you make of it? The general population growth and also the composition of the youth element.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roberts. Hadi, how are you doing? Good, man. Well, good evening, everyone. My perspective on the growth rate of the youths, I mean, it tells us all one thing, that we have potentials, because a country that has its youth population growing rapidly, it means that we can harness our demographic dividend. And what it tells us as well is that we should come together as a country to ensure that those resources, those opportunities that are within the youthful population are really, really utilized. Because as we speak, based on my observation, it is underutilized. So what we should do as a country is ensure that the growth rate that we are having in the youthful population will continue to grow, but we will also continue to utilize it.
Hadi, if I may turn to you on the same question.
So, thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. Good evening, viewers. I think we're at a very crucial point as a country, as a nation. We're experiencing a huge youth bulge, a massive explosion of the growth of the youthful population of the country. And like David said, this calls for obviously attention in terms of what opportunities we can reap as a result of this growing population, but also looking at the threats this trend poses to our national development. Now, looking at our current total fertility rate as a nation, we're at 5.6, the Gambia, and this is scary to some extent, because if the youthful population is growing, and we are of course part of this 5.6, and we're not being catered for enough or adequately, like David said, we stand to have a lot of issues. Young people not being productive, young people not being prepared to take up leadership positions, young people not being able to take over and handle the economy of this country. And that just leads us to one thing: underdevelopment. And I think this can be avoided, obviously, if we make the right investments in the young people. In 2017, the Gambia launched the African Union Roadmap on harnessing the demographic dividend with the right investments in young people. But I would also be quick to say it goes beyond endorsing policy documents and domesticating legal instruments, international documents that promote these ideals, but it has to do with practicalizing or operationalizing some of these documents in order for us to be able to yield the benefit we stand to realize if we invest in our young people.
Excellent. I just want to pinpoint another fact, and perhaps for the benefit of our viewers, most of the discussions we will be having here today in terms of the youths would call for a general overview and definition of what is a youth. And here we have adapted the Gambia Bureau of Statistics definition of what a youth is. A youth is anyone who is between the ages of 13 and 30. So I think having that definition is also important. But with reference to that definition, if I may, the Gambia Bureau of Statistics have gone to the extent of providing us a demarcation of the respective cohorts, of the youthful population. So if we look at, slide 2, and here we have between the ages of 13 and 14, we have over 160,000 youths, broken down into male and female. Between the ages of 15 and 19, we have over 400,000 youths. Between the ages of 20 and 24, we have 180-something thousand. 20 and 25, 7,000. And between the ages of, on 30 exactly, we have over 100,000. All in all, if you add this, we have a population of 806,660 youths. And you are talking of a population of 1.8 million. But I want to pay specific attention. You had it in your response to the question I asked initially. You made reference to the fertility rate. And if we look at the trend in this country, we have seen that most of the youths tend to marry between the ages of 15, going as, low as, 24. Actually, in terms of the number of youths who are getting married, most of them fall within the cohort of 15 and 19. I mean, if you go to the rural areas, the practice is even worse. So, as a follow-up question to the point that you made, Hadi, the fertility rate and the fact that these youths do not have the requisite opportunities in terms of employment opportunities, what do you foresee or perceive as the risks inherent in youths getting married early?
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. Again, I think part of this question was answered in my previous intervention. However, I'd like to highlight more. We're looking at young people being married from the ages 15 to 24. And it's also alarming to know that about 30% of young women and girls in the Gambia, specifically I'm going to concentrate on young women and girls, get married before their 18th birthday. Now, this alone is scary. This is a portion of our population that is not fully prepared to make decisions. This is a portion of our population that is not independent to provide for themselves. This is a portion of our population who have probably not even attained secondary education. Now, what happens when a young person is not fully educated, at least to grade 12, does not have the economic opportunities or the financial standing to be able to take care of him or herself and the family they're planning on upbringing, or the family they've already started raising, and probably do not have jobs? There will be a trend of dependency, and already we're experiencing this. Young people highly depend on the adult population to be able to cater for their own needs, including those who are married. And this, to one extent, I would say is risky again. I keep using this word, because if we say young people are the future, and again, if young people are the present, in my opinion, and they not avail these opportunities to grow and self-actualize, this nation is not moving. Our economy will be stagnant if it's not going backwards. And at the end of the day, we have the adult controlling the economy and at some point phasing out, because obviously they grow and death comes at some point, and you leave behind a population that's not able to take over the leadership, the economy of this country. We will stay stagnant.
David, in your intervention, you spoke about harnessing the demographic dividend that exists within the youthful population. Do you believe that the government is harnessing the demographic dividend? Or forget the government, the country as a whole. Are we harnessing the demographic dividend? If yes, why do you believe so? And if no, what are some of the possible solutions that you could proffer to help us to begin to harness the demographic dividend?
Thank you. Well, the country is the government is the country. So I will address both of them as the same, and myself included, we all included. Well, I will say yes to an extent, to the sense that if you look at the National Development Plan, which is the recent document that the government is using as a yardstick to bring development into our country, the youth element is one of the top priorities, one of the top 8 priorities that the government is looking at. So to that also, you will see that the government is doing effort to ensure that initiatives and the youth unemployment is also being addressed at it. And if you look at also ministries, Ministry of Youth, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Finance, basically all ministries are basically looking at initiatives, and they have initiatives that are really addressing the demographic dividend to ensure that they have been honest. But also I believe that looking also at the problem, which is why I said to an extent, meaning there is more to be done as well. Looking at marriage, for example, can you imagine our girls being able to get married at the age of 15 when they're not even taking personal decisions of their life? Because if I recall, when I was 15, I was going to school, and there are certain decisions I wasn't even taking in my life. So now imagine that aspect, and then you're getting married. So what should also happen is that I think counseling plays a key role. Is it going to be compulsory for youths to go through counseling before they get married at that age? Because at that age, if you get married, next thing you think of is having a child. If you have a child, next thing is who's going to take care of that child? Will that child get the right health care that he or she needs? It's a big question. If the health care is not taken care of, you see that the productivity of that child will reduce as the child grows. That affects the economy. That affects our health system. And the government will have more budget to spend on health care because of our population are not healthy. The second thing is that you expect that child to go to school, education. Now look at the recent results. It's quite poor. And I could say that some of the reasons is this. Because if we have so many children who do not have the right economics of scale to go to school, to get through the best schools, to get the right education, to get the right tools that they need to educate themselves, because of they do not control wealth. then you will see that it's also a problem. But it's not just the wealth, but they are at a position where they cannot make decisions because of the age that they are in. So we need to ensure that these people are really looked after. And we all as a whole play a key role. What should the government do is ensure also too that there are right policies that are preventing these people from doing these acts. And if that happens, you will see that they will be able to get married at the right age, make the right decisions for themselves, take care of their children. And if they do that, you will see that, one, they will be able to get a job, because if they do not have a job, they will not be able to take care of. Or if they do not create their own jobs, they will not be able to do that. So most people you see getting married, also some of them are unemployed. They are highly dependent on a third party. So now, if that dependency is still there, how can somebody depend on you as well? So you will see that it's really risky, like Hadi said. So we need to provide alternatives, both from the government, the private sector, and the civil society. Can we come together and ensure that these issues that are directly affecting the youths, especially unemployment, because unemployment is high. We're looking at a progressive growth of population. So as unemployment may really grow, because right now we're at 40%. So as our population is growing, it may grow. So we need to look at policy measures. We need to look at initiatives from the private sector, the public, and also the civil society to address these issues.
You spoke of the national development plan and how the youth's top priority as long as that policy document is concerned. But I want to go to a point that Hadi made and which we should be cognizant of. She spoke of this point in terms of that creating policies and domesticating international policies should not stop at that. You know, we need to look at substantial, tangible measures in terms of practicalizing, you know, some of the policies that we put in place. Yes, I mean, I've had the Office of the President, I mean, on this forum in which they tried to, you know, discuss and explain the National Development Plan. But the point I'm alluding to in terms of what government is doing to, harness the demographic, I mean, the youth, dividend, is in terms of the point that Hadi made. What practical measures are there on the ground? We can talk of YEP. I mean, YEP is a practical policy, a practical initiative or measure that is on the ground, that is helping the youths to that is helping to harness the demographic dividend. But we know that YEP in itself is not a homegrown initiative. It is an initiative that was sponsored or funded by the EU and funded by the EU to help, you know, deter or preempt this wave of youth migrating from the Gambia into Europe. So my point is, you know, fine, the government may say that under the NDP we have the youths and the youths are, our priority. But what practical measures has the government put in place since coming into office? And the government has been in office for 18 months. You know, these are the sort of things that we need to see. It's not about just creating policies or saying that we want to do this. What measures are being done? That is the point that I was making. And perhaps by now, knowing that YEP is for a particular period of time, maybe perhaps now we should have had a domesticated YEP policy, whatever it is that we may have call it, that the government would fully fund to get ready so that when YEP runs out, YEP funded by the EU runs out, we would have a continuation of these same policies to help ensure that we actually leverage, you know, the youthful dividend. So this is the point I'm trying to make. I don't know whether you have any follow-up point on that.
Well, policies alone will never bring development. You know, policies are just there. It's just a document that will show you what can be done to achieve results. It's the government and the people that will ensure that that policy is being put into action. That policy is bringing initiatives that will drive that development, that will drive that economic growth. So when we just talk of policies, the policies will never bring the economic development that we want. We need to put those policies. It's just a document. We need to take that document and put it to work. And it's not just the responsibility of the government. Now, if you look at YEP, it's funded by the EU. Now, if you look at also, recently our government was in Brussels, or there was somewhere.
Brussels, China?
China.
Recently the president was in China.
Now, even the National Development Plan, they're doing resource mobilization for it. Now, I'm not saying it's bad, but can we also look out for what resources can we get within the country, especially from the private sector? Now, we have private sector leaders in the Gambia. If they really believe that the private sector plays a key role, can we start resource mobilization from our private sector within to fund some of these initiatives? Believe me, if we start piecemeal, it may not be much, we may not reach the millions, we may not reach the billions, but even the thousands will take ownership from that private sector to say that, okay, I have my thousands in this NDP, so I need to make sure it works. Now, looking at YEP, it's true, it's funded, but YEP is also bringing the transformation that we want. Because YEP is coming up with initiatives. YEP has initiatives that youth are benefiting from. So they are creating employment for youths. Self-employment is being created. But when YEP goes, what is going to happen to us? So we need to ensure that the short period that YEP is here, we utilize the potential that YEP is giving us. We utilize the initiatives and the benefit that YEP has. So when YEP moves on, we will be sustainable. The Gambia should not ever be dependent on donors or aid. If we depend on donors or aid, you will see that our problems will still remain, because we will still have that mindset that we have to wait for the donors to come and help us. We have to wait for the donors to come and finance us. Can't we finance ourselves? Because it's our development, it's our country. If the donors decide to stay in their country, who's going to develop this country? Then this country is at risk. If this country is at risk, we are at risk. So can we provide alternative solution in financing? And it starts inward, especially from the private sector, where I come from.
Okay, good point. Since we're in YEP, I think we'll focus the discussions on, on YEP for a minute before we move on. The YEP scheme has been a good scheme, irrespective of what people say and the negatives that have been leveled against the scheme in terms of how it's administered and how it is, not homegrown but funded by the EU. But barring those negatives, I want to come to you, Hadi. Do you believe that trying to put a scheme in place that mimics the YEP, but which is homegrown and created by government, or even to the extent as David is proposing, that have the private sector and the public sector come together and help fund such a project? Do you think that would help in any regard? And if it would help, and if you believe that such a scheme is warranted, what would you reckon as areas of focus for such a scheme?
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. Again, yes. A local version of YEP, once it phases out, as in YEP that's funded by the EU phases out, will definitely help. Usually people would say, and I agree, we have an issue of sustainability. You have donors come in, fund one or two projects, and they leave, and that's the end of it. And we fold our hands and wait for them to come back, or someone else to come back and carry on with funding. So having something that is homegrown, something that started by us, I think will help, because there's power in ownership. When you have a stake in something, when something is Gambian, it adds value to how much you treat that initiative, how much you regard it, and how much you are able to utilize the opportunities that such an initiative brings forward, especially for the benefit of young people. And if we're going to look at what areas such a scheme or such an initiative is going to look at, obviously entrepreneurship is one of them, but also I believe in governance and leadership capacities of young people being built as a way of solving some of the issues young people are facing. Because, okay, I can be given the resources to start up a business to solve a particular financial problem or a social issue, that is if you're a social entrepreneur, but how am I then contributing at national level to the decision making? I can start my business and pay my taxes and owe nobody and employ few people, but how about my voice and my opinion and how I think the country should be run?
Political participation.
Exactly.
Okay.
So governance, building the leadership capacity of young people for me is very key. Also looking at the area of education, because he just mentioned the issue of the recent results, grade 12 or grade 9? Grade 12 results. And I think every year it just keeps going down, and you're wondering, where are we really going? What is going to happen to the next batch and the batch after that? And if measures are not taken, we are doomed. We have children studying courses they're not interested in. We have children not knowing what job opportunities there are for when they leave high school and probably make it into university. And that is if they're lucky to get into university, because not everyone is able to afford to pay for tertiary education in the country. And we have people who are interested in studying things that does not have a market in the country. So for me, apart from entrepreneurship, governance and leadership building, or leadership capacity building for young people, as well as education, are key pillars that such a scheme or such an initiative should concentrate on. And I believe will yield the benefits we're trying to get.
To add on what you're saying, I think also looking at YEP, although is funded by the EU, but YEP works with implementing partners. And most of these implementing partners are homegrown initiatives. Homegrown initiatives that are driving solutions, like Startup Incubator, Starlink Consortium, GIN, GYCC. Most of them, they're homegrown initiatives. So these homegrown initiatives, they will bring up the initiatives, implement it, and most of them are implemented by youths. So what YEP will do is YEP will partner to provide that financial assistance, to provide that technical assistance, in order to drive that objective that you want to achieve. So you will see that most of the initiatives and programs that YEP are working with, they're not driven by YEP, but they're driven by us, the young people. We drive it, we ensure that the results are generated, and together we all achieve our common goal. So YEP is not just an institution that is just coming and doing everything. They are coming, they will bring what they have, and we bring what we have, and together we achieve our resource, our common objective and results. Now, if you look at also education, before, because when we were younger, there were times that education was for a particular group. For example, if you are not part of the elites, if you're not part of a particular society, you will not go to school, or you will only stop at high school, or you will not reach senior school or university. And before, if you look 20 years ago, most people that went to university was outside. So what will happen is you have to be connected to somebody to be able to get you that scholarship, or you have to be really good. So now education is for everybody. So will that method that we were using work? So we really need to diversify. We need to put skills in place. Those who are good with their hands, let them go to education where they can learn carpentry, masonry, or any skill that they want. Career counseling should be institutionalized in the education system. People should know, before I go into masonry, this is how it works. Before I go study commerce, before I go study science, this is what I'm expected. This is what I will. You should not know that you need to spend 7 years in medical school by the time you start applying for it. You should be prepared from grade 9. If I want to go to science, I want to be a medical doctor, it will take me 7 years to finish my medical degree. You are prepared for that. But none of us, including myself, was prepared. I just felt I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it. Although I have a preconceived mind about what people in the business sector were doing, I used to see how they were able to grow and control so much wealth, and I was passionate about that. I saw both of my parents were doing business, so I was passionate about that, and I said, I want to study commerce. When I finish, I want to do business. And I was able to have my auntie to guide me through that process, who played an integral role in my life, that she had to counsel me so that I'll be able to make the right decisions, and which helped me to be able to get where I am in a short period of time. So those things should be institutionalized. Mentorship should be institutionalized.
Excellent point. We'll come back to the bit regarding education, but for now I want to stick on the issues that challenges the youths as they were. And here I want to go back to YEP, and I just want us to be clear. The issues that we're discussing as regards YEP is not about whether it's funded by the EU or not funded by the EU and the manner in which YEP is being implemented. But what we are saying is YEP has a time frame. I don't know whether it's a 3-year or a 5-year, a 4-year time frame. And soon YEP is going to run out. The question now is, what happens when YEP runs out? And it is appropriate for us to start thinking of this as a country. And my point is, if government has education as a priority, and if the YEP program is delivering, as you have highlighted here, given the manner in which it is being implemented, then government needs to start engaging the people who are implementing YEP, trying to find a follow-up program, even if that program is going to be exclusively and solely funded by government. Because we know that the president have had a donors roundtable conference in Brussels. They have managed to mobilize pledges, 1.45 billion. But given the dynamics that we face as a country, and given the relevance of the youth in this country, and given the percentage composition of the youth in the overall population, this should have happened as of yesterday. Government has been in place for 18 months. I mean, that's the point I'm making. Yeah. So we need to start looking, you know, to see how do we make sure that YEP has another 3 or 4 years to come. So in that way, the issue of sustainability, as Hadi pointed out, would be addressed. Things that have started that are working would not now collapse because YEP have come to an end. I think these are some of the points that I'm making.
Yeah,
and, you know,
I understand. Yes. And YEP is taking also some measures regarding that. If you look at YEP, one of the things that I love that they're doing is they're building institutional capacity. If you look at, I'll take for example, Startup Incubator. YEP is giving us extra knowledge that will help us when we move. For example, I'm certified to train on design thinking, food safety. It's extra skills that I have that will help my institution to grow. Not only our institution, but all the other partners. Every one of them, YEP is ensuring that their institutional capacity is being built. And we can only develop if we have strong institutions. And strong institutions build strong leaders. Now, if we are built, if our capacity is being built to be able to be sustainable, then what will happen? When YEP moves out, or before YEP moves out, we need to think of what other innovative ways can we bring in to replace YEP. The technical capacity may still be there because we have Gambians who have the technical expertise, and the Gambians are working at YEP who have the technical expertise. So they can still come in. Now the financial resources, that is the most critical component. Are we going to bring the private sector, or are we going to bring the people whom we have built their capacity to be able to create jobs and improve their wealth to come in and support? Or are we going to also put the money that we have already into investments that will yield results? Are we going to drive the private sector? But now the critical thing that needs to be looked at, if the funding component of YEP doesn't exist, how do we move as a country?
And to put the last point on the discussions regarding YEP, I think YEP was an 11 million euro envelope. Yeah. And I don't know how much spread, you know, or what the reach has been with that 11 million euros in terms of how many youths the YEP program actually able to influence. We're talking of about 690,000 youths. You know, when we talk of initiatives, when we talk of programs, we have to think of reach as well. And if the YEP program is able to influence 40–50% of the youthful population, then I think we all would begin, to be happy because we know there'll be meaningful impact. But I don't want to get into those discussions. But, this is the reason why we're saying the government now needs to think of a program that is far beyond the YEP envelope as long as funding is concerned, to ensure that it is able to have meaningful impact and reach within the youthful population. And I think if we do that, we would begin to move as a country. But speaking of the youth, incidentally, the youth policy of 2009 to 2018 comes to an end this year.
Yeah.
And if we look at the youth policy, there were 3 focus areas: to invest in the youths for purposes of realizing national development, to create employment opportunities for out-of-school youths, and to enable the youths to operate within a wide variety of cultures. Let me go to her. Hadi, your take in terms of those 3 focus areas and objectives. Do you feel that it's been 9 years? Has that been realized?
In my opinion, and this is personal, I don't think we're there. And if we were there, I don't think we would have been discussing issues of young people and how they need to be catered for in order to ensure economic growth, especially in the area of employing out-of-school youth. David mentioned the issue of 40% unemployment rate in the country. 40% out of every 100, 40 people are not employed. That is scary. Who caters for them? Who provides for them? If they're not catered for, how do they try to find ways of providing for themselves? This brings up the issue of crime and violence. This brings up the issue of irregular migration. Sometimes we say, oh, the young people are idle, they sit on the streets, they drink attire, but this is not really, this is not real. And we need to be honest with ourselves. Young people want to make it. I don't think there's any single person who just wants to sit and fold their hands and say, oh, someone is going to provide for me. There is pride in being able to take care of yourself and the people in your surrounding. But if you do not have the ability, you do not have the capacity, and the opportunities are not availed to you. Again, I'm going to talk about how many people are able to get tertiary education. How many people are able to get jobs after obtaining tertiary education? He mentioned the issue of not being able to decide on what to study. When I graduated from grade 12, I really didn't know I was going to study law. And I studied law for 4 years, but really that's not what I want to do. That's 4 years of my time wasted. Maybe I have the degree and at some point down the line, I will use it, but I could have been doing something else, but what I was interested in was not available. Now, looking at investing in young people, how much has been invested? If we were supposed to grade ourselves across the 9 years this policy has been existing, how much have we done for the young people? What has been the change in the unemployment rate in the country? What has been the change in youth involvement in decision making, youth being active participants in political spaces in the country? These are the things we need to look at. And from my opinion, obviously without any statistics to back this up, I don't think we've gotten there.
David, 1 minute on that same question.
Well, I think they should also try to do an impact assessment and review that document and tell us where we are regarding that document. But right now, if we all speak, we'll just speak based on our opinion, which, I share the similar opinion with Hadi, that I don't believe we have achieved it. And we have a long way to go, especially on that unemployment component. And we have initiatives that are working towards achieving that objective.
I know we started the discussion, or you started, Hadi, the discussion in terms of early marriage and the challenges it poses to us as a country. But here, I would want us to look at the statistics as they were, with reference to slide 4. As per the 2013 census, there are 12.3% of our youths, and this comes to about 25,000, both male and female, who are between the ages of 13 and 19 and are married. And there are, between the 20 and 24 age cohort, if you add that to the 13 to 19 cohort, the percentage becomes 44.8% who are married and is a little over about 85,000. Quite an alarming number if you look at the percentage or even the number, as it is. Early marriage, 34% of the youths who are married early are females, and 26% are males. And 45% of those who marry early live in the rural areas, and about 13% in the urban areas. This is pretty much in your line of work, Hadi. Are these statistics alarming to you? I know you spoke about the issue of early marriage earlier and the issues and the challenges that it brings. But why should the government be alarmed? If the government is alarmed, or if the government is paying attention to these statistics, why should they be alarmed, and why should they begin to do something about this?
We're talking about over 80,000 dreams cut short. We're talking about over 80,000 members of our community not being able to realize their potential. We're talking about over 80,000 people who may be exposed or vulnerable to raising children while they are still children. That's for those who are below 18. And even for those who are above 18 and still maybe around 24. Are they self-sufficient? Have they self-actualized to a point where they can take care of themselves? This is alarming, I would agree with you. And I think it is time we are real with ourselves. Okay, child marriage, that is for people who are getting married below the age of 18, is illegal in the country, but it's still happening, and we all know, we see these things happening. It goes beyond government trying to do something. I think we need to look at ourselves inward. Obviously, there's a gap. We talked about 45% living in the rural in the rural areas, and about 13 living in the urban areas. This says a lot about opportunities. It says a lot about having the chance to thrive. It says a lot about do you have access to education, and do your parents believe in educating the girl child or the young person to be able to become responsible adults in the future? Are you able to financially, or do you have financial support? Are your parents able to cater for you, to feed you, to clothe you, to make sure you're healthy? If these things are not happening at the level of rural Gambia, obviously this explains the gap between the 45 and the 13%, but still even the 13% for urban Gambia is too much. You would maybe have the opinion that we live in the combos and we have education, we have businesses, and young people are exposed to a lot of opportunities, but the statistics say otherwise. And like I said, 80 something plus thousand dreams cut short. Depending on other people, becoming a burden on our economy, becoming dormant and not active participants in community development in all aspects, raises questions again of crime, of wanting to go where the grass seems greener on the other side. And sometimes these are not real, and we've been losing thousands of our young people because of irregular migration, and it is continuing. Young people will still find alternative routes. If we stop the Libya one, they'll find another one because they're not comfortable here. And it is time we make ourselves comfortable. It is time we make our young people comfortable to stay here and believe that they can make it here. And I believe that's the only way progress can be made.
Now, you spoke about, David, earlier. You made reference to the unemployment rate being 40%, and that affecting a greater portion of the youths. And I know that Hadi spoke about the high dependency ratio within our country in terms of the youth depending on their parents. But I would give you another statistics that is equally alarming, as highlighted by the Gambia Bureau of Statistics, and this is that we have a dependency ratio of 1:8 in this economy, meaning that 8 people depend on one working family member, and that, I think, in itself, is alarming. And considering the high unemployment rate and considering the opportunities that the university have brought in terms of diversifying and creating pretty much extending the opportunities within the educational system, so that people, who couldn't afford to go outside and study could now study, within at university level within the Gambia, as long as they meet the requisite entry requirements. And coming back to the points in terms of what opportunities could we create, I mean, I know we spoke about this briefly as well. Internships, what is your take? I mean, how come as a country we have a very vibrant private sector, could be more vibrant if at all the economic, the conducive, I mean, if the economic environment was more conducive. But we have pockets of internship opportunities in this country, but it is, I mean, there isn't any policy nationally that says that private sector institutions or even government parastatals and government institutions should provide internship opportunities to youths. And here, these are the sort of things I'm referring to when I talk about practicalizing opportunities for the youths. Now, if the government went out on a limb today and said we're going to promulgate policy that makes it mandatory for private institutions to provide internship opportunities for people that are graduating from university or people that are leaving high school, senior secondary school. And if the government itself, leads by example and provides some sort of an incentive for the private players that would be doing such, maybe perhaps a 0.05% waiver, if you will, on the corporate tax rate, then you would begin to see people saying, okay, let's provide this because we are now addressing the issues and the challenges that really involves and should concern us. So I want to discuss that as well. Yeah. Internship opportunities and youth schemes. Yeah. I was watching a program on the same QTV, and they discussed this. What youth schemes do we have in existence in this country? But also apprenticeship in terms of technical vocation educational training. Yeah, how many construction farms do we have in this country? The youths who are going to GTTI. These are the things that we're referring to when we're talking of practicalizing and making sure that policy now moves out of paper and becomes practicalized and being implemented. What is your take on those initiatives?
So moving away from the schemes that are in place, which obviously we know what the situation currently is in the country, the idea of internships. People are graduating from university, and instead of having jobs, they're being offered, oh, you can actually come and be an intern at our office. And what I've seen, I don't know if this is different from your opinion, but what I've seen usually, sometimes your capacity isn't built to these internships because you're just seen as another young person who's just looking for opportunity. You find yourself taking notes and making coffee for people. And where the decisions are actually made, where you are supposed to be exposed to understand how some of these institutions operate, you do not have a seat there. Because obviously you're not being paid, and there's this lack of value for the inputs of young people, if I'm allowed to say this. I know a lot of people will not agree with me, but really there isn't that much value for how much we bring to the table. Now, apart from that constraint, how many people are willing to take in interns? How many institutions are willing to take in interns? Institutions might not have these policies in place to say, oh, well, every summer we'll take this amount of young people and build their capacities and prepare them for the job market. But when these same institutions have openings, they ask you for 4 or 5 years of experience. Where are you supposed to get this experience from if you're not given the opportunity? And again, another dimension that is also controversial, you're providing an internship opportunity that's probably unpaid, which I understand because of budgetary constraints here and there. But this young person finds it difficult to even pay transportation to your institution. So they're putting in their own resources, which they're trying to make in some little way or depend on their parents to provide, to come to your institution to not be productive. And at the end of the day, you just write some recommendation letter. That's probably just one you usually change the names and just tell them you can go find a job somewhere, and they end up getting a job and their capacity is still the same as they left the university. It's unfortunate.
Well, let me. I will share. Okay, because well, I will first thank those who gave me internships because I'm a practical example. I had the opportunity to speak to some university students, and I'm a practical example of what internship can do in someone's life, because I've done 2 internships. And my work ethics, my attitude towards work, hungry to achieve, was all developed during my internships. And these are lessons that I learned from internships, and I will never forget. And I even got my job through an internship. So internships can be good or can be bad. But how I was able to get it was from the people I work with. They were able to know that, okay, we need to develop this boy. We need to change him from a boy to a man. And I got lessons learned. Although I failed so many times, but still it was a learning point for me. But because of the environment I was in, I was able to move forward. So what the private sector should do is create that environment that, okay, when you come as an intern, it's an investment. It's not just that they're coming to do work. They're coming and you are investing in them. Even though the transport refund can be small, but they're investing time. They're investing effort into you to make you better. So that alone is a huge investment. So companies should be willing to put that investment aside to say that every year we will develop 2 people to grow. And also as an intern, I realized that money was not the motivating factor because I wanted to learn. So if you want to be an intern, be ready to learn. Be ready to sacrifice that 3 months or that 6 months to be somebody. But it's a two-way program. You have to invest your own time. They invest their own time. You have to invest your resources. They invest their resources. So what also we should do as a private sector, I hope GCCI will take the lead on it as a private sector, leader of the private sector. So private sector institutions should lobby with government to say, we are willing to take interns, but you're willing to go and give us this. It could be tax, it could be incentives or any other thing. But if also there's a window where private sector can gain from investing in internships, they don't gain from internships. They invest. Even though you as an intern, you can still bring in results during your internship, but they have also invested in you to ensure that that results has been honest. So if you go through that, when you finish, then you can say, I can look for a job, because you can always use your internship as an experience that you have done this and this and this, or the youth scheme which you have gone through, and you can always prove yourself.
Let me just give a practical example, and I hear the point that Hadi has made in terms of how people appreciate and value interns, thinking that they don't bring much in the table. So instead of helping them to grow their capacity and giving them an experience that ordinarily they would not have had, they sort of focus them on mundane activities like making coffee and running errands here and there. But I mean, I ran an internship program when I was Director General at the Gambia Tourism Board, and and this did not exist. I brought it in, and I hope that it is still being done at the level of the Gambia Tourism Board. And we've had interns who today are working for other companies. I mean, I can name names. But the thing is, there has to be structure. And if government is going to create a policy around this, there has to be structure. Yeah, if government is going to engage the private sector and create a policy, there'll be a policy document that clearly would demarcate in terms of the deliverables. I mean, you are an intern, you first work, I mean, all the interns that came into the Gambia Tourism Board, they spend the first week going to the respective departments. Yeah, you would sit maybe for 1-2 weeks in all the departments that exist, and you'll be assigned to somebody. So you are put through an induction program. There is a framework that is put in place. If your internship is for a particular period of time, 3 months, that 3 months, these are what you're going to be doing. And at the end, you have to write, the intern, have to provide us with a report in terms of what you've been able to learn. This is what internship should be about. Yeah. You understand? And sometimes, as an employee at Standard Chartered Bank, who also has an internship program, I have seen a graduate of the university having a job as, within the foreign exchange department. Subsequently, that student went on to do his master's and came back and is now working for the Islamic Development Bank as a risk analyst. So, these things are possible. The thing is, how much of a value do we place on them? But perhaps the last question that we would get to discuss on this point, and I'm going back to the issue of education. You mentioned about the WAS results and how bad it is and how things are deteriorating. I want to get your point, Hadi, and I'm going to you first instead of David, because you are a woman and you know the role that women play in our society. I believe that the poor performance in the WAS, whereas it might be challenged as a result of some of the youth issues that we have discussed here, it is also challenged because at the level of the family, discipline, values of discipline, hard work, is no longer there. Yeah. We used to be taught when we were kids values of discipline, values of honesty, values of hard work. So even as an average student, if you are not good at school, the upbringing, parents telling you, keep studying, have a timetable for you to study. With time, you become better. What is your take? Are those values being inculcated, or is it that there has been a compromise? What is your take on that?
There has been a compromise. If you agree with me, I think it is not all homes and not all parents who are fully involved in the education of their children, and I think this also plays a role, because sometimes you see parents would rather just send their children to school and they spend maximum or 8, 9, 10 hours in school with teachers, and when they come back home, some parents are not really bothered about what you gained in school today, were you given an assignment and stuff like that, and it takes a certain quality or a type of parent to be careful and be attentive of those things. And for others, it's just, oh, I sent my child to school, I automatically expect them to pass. So even though our educational structure has a problem, the system has an issue, and our kids are failing, parents also have a role to play, and that's where, like you said, discipline comes in. Not just discipline as in you need to be well behaved, but discipline as in you need to be focused on where we think you are heading and what is in your best interest. And this will take a whole lot of commitment. It will take investment of time, energy, resources, anything that you can think of that will help these children to grow up and become responsible people. But it starts at home. The conversations we have with our children. Do we talk about issues affecting them? Do we talk about the challenges they're having in school? Do we visit the schools to see how well is my child performing and what can I do to support? It's not just about sending them to school and say, oh, you have your temporary parents for a few hours of the day and they'll take care of you, and we expect perfect results at the end of the day.
David, 1 minute on that point.
Well, I mean, on that point, what I would say is let's look at the example of Singapore and Rwanda. If you cannot look at their example, it will be very difficult for us to, develop. But education is one of the things that they use, but they invested in skills education. We need to really diversify education. Let's move into the masonry, the carpentry, the welding, the mechanics. These are fields that we need to explore. It's not just about the WAS. We need to have the WAS, yes, but let us also move and invest into those areas, because those areas is education, and it can also create jobs for our young people.
Viewers, thank you for joining us. This was what we had for you today, the youthful demographic dividend in this country. It is time that we begin to look at it and to harness it. I believe that the Gambia Bureau of Statistics has given us a 2013 census report that we should all pay attention to. The ticking bomb, let's avoid it. Let us do what is needful for our youths so that we could live a successful life in this country. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the program, David. Thanks for the program, Adi.